The gorgeous alien girl gawked, mesmerized by the human's bulging muscles, as Sean Porter smashed his skull into Uko's. Crack! Alien blood gushed, spraying from the shattered helm. Porter knew this wasn't over, though, not until he brought that alien crystal armor back to Earth, reverse-engineered, and slapped it on every soldier still alive to kill these Ladosian scum. Gunfire and bolts of plasma zipped through the burning starship's hull breach as Sean brawled with the grey monstrosity. Porter had been cleaning out Ladosian nests all year, across worlds now ash, searching for tech to turn the tide for his species. For once, he was grateful for the tight quarters, keeping him nice and close to smash alien head. Sean's steel-toed boot crunched into Uko's hip. Uko swiped with razor claws. Porter caught the claws, snapping them off. Both combatants roared in rage and pain. Then Sean saw it, through the blood vessels popping in his eyes, a glint of purple light where his headbutt had cracked open Uko's chest armor, exposing an iridescent control module within the armor's lattice. The key to it all. With a blood-curdling scream, Sean ripped the module out of Uko's armor with one hand and hurled the flailing alien out of the hull breach with the other. But Uko was already getting up, preparing to charge back in, and an entire legion of Ladosians were right behind, aiming to make sure Sean never made it off this rock alive with their armor secrets. The human soldier quickly stashed the module in his pack's hardened survival pouch, the location beacon already blinking. If he died, the armor sample would still get to the research division. But either way, Sean swore to God, Allah, and Odin he was getting in a ship and punching out of orbit ASAP to hand-deliver humanity's last hope to the eggheads himself. He cocked his rifle and sprinted into the firefight, cursing. War was hell, but being the last of your kind in the universe would be worse. He only had to get to the extraction site, then his species would be the ones doing the ass-kicking. Sean Porter dashed through the debris field of the crashed starship, plasma bolts sizzling past his head, from the enraged Uko hot on his heels. He sprinted and rolled, chunks of twisted metal providing momentary cover as he fled with the priceless armor module. "So you cannot escape, human," Uko bellowed, his voice seeming to shake the earth. "I will reclaim what you stole." Sean didn't waste breath on a retort, pouring all his energy into running. He cut around the ruined husk of a ship's engine and froze. A Ladosian heavy assault platform loomed before him, its quad plasma cannons aimed directly at his face. Sean's blood ran cold. Time dilated, seconds stretching to infinity as the cannons glowed, superheated plasma boiling within the barrels. With a burst of desperate energy, Sean hurled himself sideways, hitting the ground hard. A heartbeat later, searing streams of plasma scorched through the space he'd just occupied, the blistering heat washing over him like the breath of hell. Agony lanced through him, his skin bubbling, but he pushed himself to his feet. No time to succumb. Spotting a wrecked human APC, he sprinted to it, leaping up to man the roof-mounted railgun. Gritting his teeth, he swung the massive weapon around to target the assault platform. The railgun bucked against his shoulder as he held the trigger down, the recoil threatening to tear his arms from their sockets. A hail of hypervelocity slugs ripped into the Ladosian machine, blasting off layers of armor in clouds of shrapnel. Finally, a round found the power core. The explosion was blinding, a searing wave of light and heat. In the confusion, Sean leaped down, racing into the billowing smoke. He had to put distance between himself and Uko, had to reach the extraction point. There, a human recon hoverbike, its rider a charred corpse. Sean vaulted onto it and gunned the throttle, the bike rocketing forward. He glanced at the display. Nearest fob was 50 clicks out. He'd be pushing the bike and himself to the ragged edge. A plasma blast suddenly streaked past his head, the heat singeing his hair. He spared a glance over his shoulder to see Uko astride a Ladosian speeder, his eyes alight with murderous intent. Sean swore, wrenching the handlebars to swerve as more plasma bolts sizzled by. The hoverbike whined in protest as he pushed it harder, Uko matching him move for move. They raced across the blasted landscape, a lethal game of cat and mouse. Sean's heart pounded. More than his life was at stake. If Uko overtook him, if he lost the armor sample, it could be the end for humanity. He wouldn't let that happen. Couldn't. Sean leaned lower over the bike, coaxing every last ounce of speed from it. The chase continued, two mortal enemies locked in a desperate contest that would decide the fate of the war and the galaxy. The skeletal remains of factories and warehouses flashed by in a blur as Sean pushed the hoverbike to its limits, Uko's speeder hot on his tail. Debris littered the bombed-out industrial district, the shattered remnants of humanity's once thriving manufacturing base. Sean swerved around a toppled comm tower, the hoverbike's underbelly scraping the ground and kicking up a shower of sparks. Uko was relentless, his piloting skills on full display, as he deftly maneuvered his craft around obstacles, slowly closing the gap between them. Sean gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes. He couldn't outrun Uko forever. His gaze darted across the desolate landscape, searching for something, anything to give him an edge. There, a half-collapsed processing plant, a gaping maw torn into its side, exposing the building's guts. Girders jutted out like broken teeth, forming a makeshift ramp. A crazy idea took shape in Sean's mind. He angled the hoverbike towards the structure, redlining the throttle. The machine whined in protest as it accelerated to max velocity. Uko, fixated on his prey, matched Sean's course. The two riders rocketed toward the building, engines screaming. At the last possible second, Sean hit the boosters and wrenched back on the handlebars. The hoverbike leapt up the ramp, metal shrieking against metal as it barely cleared the girders. It slammed down hard onto the third floor, skidding across debris-strewn concrete before coming to a rest amidst a hail of shattered glass. Sean vaulted off the bike and sprinted clear. Just as the overheated machine exploded like a grenade, the shockwave slamming into his back, he scrambled to the ledge and peered down, heart hammering against his ribs. Uko was still in pursuit, his speeder racing up the ramp. The alien warrior so intent on Sean that he failed to notice the deadly obstacle course ahead. The speeder hit a chunk of rubble at full throttle, flipping end over end. Uko was catapulted from his seat, a rag doll in the grip of physics. He smashed through the factory wall in a blossom of fire and shrapnel, disappearing into the darkness within. Sean raised his railgun and approached the jagged hole, every sense on high alert. Smoke curled from the opening, acrid and thick. Movement in the shadows set Sean's finger tightening on the trigger, just as Uko staggered into view, battered and bloody, a demon emerging from hell. With a roar, the alien hurled his staff weapon at Sean, a spear of certain death. Reflexes took over. Sean dropped to the floor, the staff passing so close overhead he felt its passage ruffle his hair. It buried itself into the wall behind him, quivering. Sean snapped his gaze back to the hole, but Uko had vanished, melting into the factory's labyrinthine depths. Doubtlessly the alien was circling around, seeking the perfect vantage to ambush him. But Sean had no choice. He had to push through this industrial graveyard to reach human lines. The armor module, humanity's last hope, was still secure in his pack. He had to get it to HQ, no matter the cost. Sean checked his weapon, took a steadying breath and slipped into the waiting shadows, senses tuned to a razor's edge. Uko was out there, hungering for his blood. Let him come. Sean was ready for anything. The hunt was on. Sean crept into the gloom of the abandoned factory, railgun held tight, senses straining. Rusting machinery loomed out of deep shadows on all sides, a labyrinth of potential ambush points. His breath came shallow and controlled. Somewhere in this derelict maze, Uko was hunting him. A flicker of motion registered in Sean's peripheral vision. He spun, finger squeezing the trigger. The railgun roared, spitting lethal slugs. Sparks flew as the rounds ricocheted off a collapsed conveyor belt. Sean scanned the darkness. No sign of Uko. Heart-pounding, he pressed deeper into the industrial tomb. Debris crunched underfoot as Sean picked his way forward, the railgun sweeping back and forth. His skin prickled with the sense of unseen eyes upon him. Suddenly Uko lunged from the black, a jagged length of pipe raised to strike. Sean parried with the railgun, and the pipe clanged against the weapon's barrel. The two warriors collided, smashing into a bank of abandoned machinery. They traded blows in a vicious flurry, Uko's pipe against Sean's gun. The pipe connected with Sean's hand in a bone-jarring impact. The railgun spun away, clattering into the dark. Sean snarled and drew his combat knife. Uko bellowed in challenge and charged. Sean met him head-on. Blade clashed against bludgeon as they whirled in a deadly dance, crashing through the decaying equipment. With a splintering crack, they burst through a rotting wall into the next chamber. Anemic light filtered down from shattered skylights. Sean's gaze landed on a rack of industrial gas cylinders. A desperate plan kindled. He hurled the knife. It tumbled end over end, glinting, and punctured one of the cylinders. Pressurized gas shrieked out in a hissing jet. Sean lunged for a sparking electrical cable snaking from a demolished control panel. He snagged it and ripped it free. With a shout, he flung the live cable into the escaping gas stream. The spark ignited the gas in a mighty concussive blast. A searing ball of flame erupted. The shockwave lifted Sean and hurled him backwards. He felt the scorching heat, the battering pressure. Ears ringing, vision swimming, Sean pushed himself up on unsteady legs. The chamber was a ruin of smoke and shattered metal. Across the debris-strewn floor, he saw Uko lying motionless. Sean stumbled forward, scooping up his knife. Step by cautious step, he approached Uko's prone form, blade at the ready. No movement, no reaction. The explosion had knocked the alien warrior out cold. Moving quickly, Sean zip-tied Uko's hands and ankles. He couldn't take the chance of Uko coming after him again. The armor module, humanity's hope, was still secure in his pack. He had to get it to HQ. Nothing else mattered. Shouldering the precious cargo, Sean turned and sprinted from the warehouse. In the distance, the sounds of fierce fighting raged unabated. Explosions, gunfire, the cries of the dying. Sean oriented himself by the hellish din and charged in the direction of the human lines. He pushed his battered body to its limits, running full tilt through the apocalyptic landscape. His silhouette stood stark against the smoke-choked horizon, a lone human warrior, bloodied but unbroken, the fate of his species carried upon his back. He didn't look behind him, didn't slow his breakneck pace. He had to get the armor to the fob. Everything depended on it. So Sean ran and ran, the sound of his pounding heart and heaving breath drowned out by the unceasing thunder of the battle raging around him. Ahead, he could see the outline of familiar human vehicles. He was close. He dug deep and found another gear, a final reserve of speed and strength. The troopers at the perimeter saw him coming, a friendly IFF code flashing from his battle rig. They waved him through, and Sean fell to his knees in the churned mud behind the line. Sean burst from the industrial wreckage, legs pumping, lungs searing. The armor module clutched to his chest like humanity's last hope. The human fob loomed ahead, its perimeter crackling with muzzle flashes and plasma trails. The earth around Sean's feet exploded as Ladosian forces zeroed in on him. He zagged desperately, pulse rounds whining past his head. A plasma bolt seared up his leg, the sizzling heat shearing through muscle. Sean staggered, almost crashing down. Teeth clenched against the scorching agony, he forced himself onward, pure willpower driving each ragged step. Human rockets streaked overhead, railguns thundering, ripping into Ladosian lines as friendly forces laid down blistering cover fire. With a final burst of fading strength, Sean hurled himself across the perimeter line. He hit hard, rolling behind a blasted-out wall section. Medics rushed in, but Sean shoved them back. He thrust the armor module into a startled technician's hands. "Get this, to HQ," Sean gasped out, his whole body shaking. "It's our shot to end this war." The technician gave a tight nod. He sprinted off, clutching humanity's salvation. Sean dragged himself up to the perimeter wall, his seared leg nearly crumpling. He snatched a dead trooper's pulse rifle, braced it on the smouldering barricade. Sighting in, he stitched withering fire into the charging Ladosians, a primal roar ripping from his throat. The battle raged at a new fever pitch, an inferno of lead and plasma. Both sides sensed the balance shifting with the armor tech in human hands. For better or worse, the end was coming like a bullet. News reached the front weeks later of a crippling human offensive. Overcoming Ladosian defenses with the reverse-engineered armor, humanity's fleets and armies were smashing the enemy back on all fronts. Ladosian forces fell into full retreat. In a bomb-scarred command bunker, Sean watched the holoscreens grimly. The Ladosian homeworld buckled under the onslaught of human warships armed with upgraded weapons. Continent-spanning firestorms blotted out the sky. Cities became ash. Part of him recoiled at the wholesale slaughter, but memories of human worlds glassed by Ladosian guns, billions dead, choked out the pity. Sean knew it was only a reprieve. The Ladosians would regroup, rebuild, thirsty for vengeance. This was the way of the war, the only way. New mission orders flashed on Sean's wrist screen, another drop behind enemy lines. He ran an eye over the targets, the enemy troop estimates, ugly odds. Sucking in a breath, he grabbed his rifle. The war ground on, and Sean with it, another battle-worn cog in the merciless machine destined to fight and fight in the cold, uncaring cosmos until there was nothing left. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.